That's the inherent problem that we have. The goal of getting more drunk to be more confident is the very thing that makes us less able to consent.
Perhaps you're just so drunk, you've had too much drinks that you can't make the correct decisions. So at the end of the day, if someone takes advantage of that, it's not your fault at all. We're allowed to go out and drink with our
I
friends.
could remember every single time someone's like said the words, I want to kiss you, can I kiss you? And it feels so nice, right?
Like my favorite moment ever.
Yeah.
It was so cute.
In Australia, so much of our social lives revolve around drinking. You want to hang out with your friends after work? Knockoffs. The sun's out on the weekend? Cans at the beach. Your mate has a free house in high school? Piss up. Your favourite team's playing? Beers. And when it comes to dating, we always ask, do you want to go for a drink? Or we're already drunk when we're meeting them out later in the night. Alcohol and sometimes drugs have long been linked with romance and sex. But for true consent, everyone needs to have the capacity to make decisions in a clear state of mind. Alcohol lowers our inhibitions, which can make us feel less self-conscious. You might think that it makes you more confident or funny, and often that's the goal when it comes to dating, but it also worsens our judgement and communication, which we need to practice consent. Today, we're exploring how Australia's drinking culture intersects with our dating and sex lives. How do we navigate consent when alcohol is so present and part of the picture? What do we owe others and ourselves? I'm Anthony Stefanos from Teach Us Consent, and I'm here to learn with you. I'm joined on the couch for this conversation by a great lineup of people. We've got Salmin, a journalist and host of Triple J's The Hookup, who lives for talking about taboo topics.
Hi.
Tom Forrest, a journalist and proud Yorta man who cares about honest conversations.
G'day, thanks for having me.
Jack Toohey as well, a content creator, author, activist, and a team member of Teach Us Consent. He also moonlights as a DJ.
Uns.
Welcome everyone, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Look, the intent behind these podcasts is to really work stuff out together and get into the nitty gritty of these complex conversations, so they can be a little bit scary and awkward. If everyone's happy to reminisce, can you all think of the last time you would have gone on a first date where drinking wasn't involved?
Goodness, I think in my dating experience, whether that was in a regional town or whether it was in a city, it feels like 90% was definitely with alcohol involved. It didn't necessarily mean getting written off or drinking far too much, but definitely at least a drink or two was involved. But I would say only 10% of my dating life, in terms of when I'm single and actually casually dating, was probably done without alcohol. And it, it would have been a really nice experience, and it definitely was. Maybe it was going for a walk in the afternoon or going to the markets, but really, I think the drinking culture is so embedded into dating, online dating, casually dating, is very much the first and seems to be the most common is to go for a drink.
Absolutely. I would curious about the 10% that didn't involve drinking. Would you say that like the first instance of you having sex with that person would have involved something beforehand that had drinking a part of it? Do you think?
Look, I'm a really confident person, generally speaking. Like I feel confident in terms of dating and meeting new people and so on. But it seems like majority of the time, and even when I speak to other friends as well, it's really commonplace to meet up with someone online, go out for a few drinks, go home, and then sleep together. And I think it's because I guess alcohol calms the nerves and, sort of brings that confidence out in people and makes them more comfortable. Having sex can be really intimate. You're being quite vulnerable, opening yourself up to someone else. So doing it sober can almost be challenging for people, especially if they're just starting to get into the dating game. So but I always found that when I speak to other people and friends or reflect on my own experiences with dating, going on a sober date is far more nice. Like you wake up feeling a lot better the next day, or at the end of the day, you're still very clear-headed and going home and feeling really good about it. So it's a shame that it's not a lot more common. It'd be nice to make that more common practice in the dating scene, especially within this country.
That's a really great answer. And do you find from your own experiences, or maybe you've heard from listeners of the hookup, that is sort of one of the main reasons why drinking is involved in the first date?
Totally. I mean, if you think about like the fact that we live in a hookup culture, like where would it make sense to have like for the person, like where would it make sense to have sex if you weren't drinking, if you are just like hooking up off an app?
Yeah.
Do you know what like it just is like you kind of do need like you're technically meeting up with a stranger that you've never met, you've seen their photos. So for I think like a lot of people it just is a go-to, like you said, for confidence. Because if you're trying to participate, which I think like is a whole other conversation, and I don't think a lot of women actually want to participate in that. But like if you are kind of like doing the thing on the apps and everyone's hooking up and you feel like pressure to do that also, then drinking kind of is a part of that.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I feel like I could count the amount of first dates I went on where I wasn't drinking on my hand.
Yeah, same. What
Like
about you?
it's
What about
so
you, Jack?
prevalent.
Yeah, I mean, my most recent date that I went on, first date that I went on was I was sober, but I didn't actually tell her before the date that I wasn't drinking, that I haven't really drunk much this year at all. And so that was like an interesting dynamic because the want to still kind of liquid courage and, let your hair down was still there. She wanted to have a couple of drinks. That was fine. There's lots of no alcoholic like beers now around. So kind of that dynamic was okay. But then it's like you get past the 2 drinks and you can only drink the non-alcoholic beers for so long as well. Then that was like a new space that I had been in. And I think about all my first dates or first kisses or first time having sex with people. I can't really think of a time that alcohol wasn't involved in some way.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? And I was curious actually by something you said, Dee, about women don't want to. Did you mean they don't want to participate in the hookup culture?
Yeah, I think like from a lot of convos I've had through the hookup, but also with friends and myself, like reflecting back on, I was single for like 8 years. And like on reflection, I'm like, I didn't actually enjoy a lot of the casual sex I was having, but I just felt like to get attention from guys, like I felt pressure to participate in it. Like I felt pressure to be on the apps and swiping and like getting drunk and hooking up. And then once I got a bit older and like I had like a year off of everything and like stopped drinking as well, I went like boy sober, as the term is called. And yeah, it was like in that experience that I did a lot of reflecting on like how I was dating and was just like, this doesn't align with who I want to be and how I want to date and the type of people I want to meet. And so that was like a huge pivotal moment for me.
But to generalize, do you think it's like easier for guys to be more keen to participate in hookup culture because it means not acknowledging, say, all the things and all the work that you did on yourself?
Yeah, well, I think alcohol often is masking insecurities. It's giving us the confidence to strike up a conversation with a stranger, or be something that may not be on that first date to try and act with a bit more like gusto or bravado or whatever. So I think that's natural. I don't think that's a man-specific thing, but I think that Australian culture particularly does put a significant amount of pressure on men to drink alcohol, to be able to be really piss fit, drink heaps of beers, and then I think that carries on into dating culture, and probably not always the healthiest way, because then we've been conditioned to think that we're meant to drink a lot to be entertaining, to be fun. And then that can obviously then cause issues when it comes to consent. So, yes, naturally, I think men do feel that pressure.
Dee, do you believe in this sort of idea that like drinking as liquid courage is an okay thing to do? I mean, obviously we're discussing it in like perhaps we should be a little bit better at this and more aware of it, but it's like, what do you think?
I think 1 or 2, I think it's going to be really hard if we're being realistic to remove like, let's go grab a drink from the way that we date. Like that's just unrealistic. And like even my relationship now with my partner, like our first date was a drink. It was 1 wine each. And then we say goodbye. But like, it's, I just think that like it is so, if you're like making an active choice to not do that, then that's great. And I think there's a real movement at the moment for people who are choosing to be sober and do, like you said, like walk dates or like come up with other plans. And if you're dating and you want to meet someone who like emulates that and is like aligns with your values, then that's great. And I think there's more people doing that. But I think most people will be like, let's grab a drink. Yeah. So I think in like that sense, like, I think that's okay. I think, which I'm sure we'll get into, it's about like how, like your question, like, well, then how many drinks is not okay?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I feel like we've touched on a lot of sort of first dating. How do we feel about when you're just out and you're drunk and you've met someone? And I think particularly these days, it's probably worth acknowledging that drugs can be more often than not involved as well, and not just alcohol. How do we see the culture, Jack, around that?
I think there is this real sense that you need to go out and you need to get really, really drunk and you need to go onto the dance floor. And I see this all the time when I'm DJing and stuff. And people having that awkward dance and their first touching and grinding and all this kind of stuff after like being on the dance floor for 4 hours because I'm playing really good music. And so like you kind of, I can see that that pressure that people put on themselves and then inherently put on other people, strangers, to kind of satiate that urge, that sexual urge that they've gone out with the intent. They've connected the two things. Having sex at the end of the night, the path to doing that is by writing myself off, basically, and having like heaps of drinks. And maybe the way that you strike up that conversation in the first place, if it's not grinding on the dance floor, it's asking to buy someone a drink. There's so much that goes into it. There's that tandem kind of the two things happening at the same time. But you can't, and we can't consent when you're really, really drunk.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And yeah, it's a really tricky place to play into. And we can talk about like how much alcohol is enough or too much, so.
We'll put your SoundCloud in the show notes as well, by the way.
I know. I was like, the amount of times you're going to mention that you're a DJ in this episode. I was like, I actually had no idea.
But I'd still like to address the next question to you again, Jack. So we've spoken a lot about how it affects our inhibitions to alcohol, but how exactly does it do this and affect our decision making?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it before about how it like reduces our inhibitions and makes us more confident. It kind of that barrier for us to, we don't want to say or do the wrong thing. The whole point of us drinking is to take that away. But when we're trying to actively communicate consent, then by taking away that thought in our brain that's trying to communicate as effectively as it can and as respectfully as it can, the more that we drink, the less we have of that, which means the less that we can communicate the consent. And so in the reverse, the less we can communicate affirmative consent because our inhibitions to say yes to something have also been removed. And that's the inherent problem that we have, is that the goal of getting more drunk to be more confident is the very thing that makes us less able to consent.
And I think to go to you again, but I think this will set up sort of the next phase of the conversation for us all is, Jack, do you mind, are you comfortable defining what consent must be reflective of capacity actually means?
Yeah, so you need to be able to effectively communicate the consent. You need to be able to be clear in mind and be able to actually think about the decisions that you're making and have that autonomy over your body to make decisions around the sexual activity that you're engaging in. So those kind of two things, again, alcohol really affects that and drugs affects that, our capacity to consent.
Dee, do you think there are some big myths around alcohol and consent that perhaps we need to discuss?
Well, yeah, I actually would like to, because there was a pivotal moment in my life where someone told me that even one drink and you having sex equals rape. And it like I honestly, like, my brain exploded because that like really, really fucked me up for a bit. And then I think I like looked into what it is legally. And I know it's different in different places, but it's like the too intoxicated part, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Because then, I mean, on the flip side of that, there'd be a lot of people going, oh my God, I've committed rape.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is the tricky part of the conversation, right? And I think it comes down to like being, having this conversation. We can have more nuance in the conversation. There is definitely like a limit that I think all of us can identify usually when someone is too drunk or we're too drunk to make really clear, communicated decisions. And so I think having one drink, like that advice from that friend or person in your life wasn't correct.
Yeah.
Having one drink doesn't impair our ability to make clear decisions and be clear of mind and make, affirmative communication. So that's like, having one drink is not there, but we don't want to also be then counting drinks and doing all these kind of things as well. So I think it's having that kind of, we need to take a step back from the conversation a little bit and go, okay, well, we know we can identify and we need to learn. If we don't, like, we all need to learn as we're growing up and we're consuming alcohol or around people that are consuming alcohol, is like really being able to identify when somebody is too drunk to really make those decisions. Are they too drunk, to drive a car? These kind of things, you can kind of use all the contextual clues to decide. And sometimes it makes it harder if we're also drunk. And that's the problem. And I think that we have to like kind of build in some like rules for ourselves and what we're comfortable with as well, so we can identify that.
How about Tom? I'd like to get your take on that sort of age-old victim-blaming type mentality myth of if they were drinking, it's their fault. How would you sort of respond to that?
Even just going back to like where the limit is, it's pretty good to know that there isn't a cutoff, right? Like there's no 6 beers and you're over the limit to consent. It wouldn't make any sense. I could have 6 beers and feel very clear and very confident in my decisions. Someone else could have 6 beers and be very much, drunk or not making correct decisions, etc. And Jack, as you mentioned, building in those rules, like you and someone else might be on a date or have met on a night out. You might be really keen. They might be kind of keen, sort of saying, yeah, but perhaps they're really drunk. Perhaps they're not really too sure what's going on. And it's sort of the responsibility comes down to you as a person to go, you know what, like, yes, I'm in the mood. And sure, there's kind of half signals, but that's not clear consent. Perhaps ask for their number or their social media, and then you can send them a message a couple of days later, see if they're down, whether it be for a walk in the park or maybe it is another single drink, but totally. In terms of like the myth of like, because someone is drunk, it's their fault. It's not the case at all. Like, you are allowed as a person to go out and get drunk. You're allowed to do that. We're allowed to go out and drink with our friends. And I don't think we have to make anyone a bad person because they want to go out drinking. It's a fun thing for people. You get up together with your friends, you go out to a gig, perhaps you drink a bit too much. But with consent, it's like the rules are with your own body. You get the final say essentially. And if you're being coerced or persuaded or really pushed, could be by someone who's in a more powerful position, perhaps a bit more intimidating. Perhaps you're just so drunk, you've had too much drinks that you can't make the correct decisions. So at the end of the day, if someone takes advantage of that, it's not your fault at all. It's it's the person who's sort of pushing you to do those things you might not actually want to do.
Are there any other myths around alcohol and consent that anyone can think of or jumps to mind?
I think there's like it's a myth, or it's just like a misconception that spiking is only like putting drugs, roofies, or MD or something in someone's drink without their knowledge. Like it's also putting an extra shot of vodka in their drink without their knowledge, or getting them a stronger drink from the bar than they asked for, and all these kind of things. So if it's not to their knowledge and they don't know and they haven't consented to the fact that you're getting them more drunk through that process, that's also drink spiking. And I think that's a really widely misunderstood kind of part of drink spiking that people don't get, and it's also really commonplace. If you think about like house parties and colleges and stuff, like it's really normal to have whole bottles of spirits there in the corner with your red cups, and you're overpouring it and you're giving it to someone. Then that's a really dangerous position to be putting them in. And it's also, people may not realize how the fact that they are now spiking someone's drink, even if the intent is there, they might not fully understand that. And so that's really important to fully get a grasp on. Anything that someone doesn't know about that they're consuming is drink spiking.
Well, why do we think there's sort of that culture in place of like getting someone drunk will make them easier, and then we can get our end goal of having sex, for instance? Like, why?
I think in just a general take that I was thinking about with that, we already know that like the general idea is there's like you get drunk, you hook up with someone, or you go out, you get more drunk, you get more confidence, you hook up with someone. So perhaps if someone is on a date and maybe it is just a glass of wine each, and if you're having a great time, perhaps it's then we should get a bottle, and maybe you do. And then it's sort of like, this is going well, it's getting later. Perhaps then the next thing is, in order to maybe go home and sleep together, it's get more alcohol. Whereas it's not like a hand-in-hand thing. You don't have to get someone drunk in order to sleep with them, essentially like that is then taking advantage, or I guess, not the right thing to do, essentially. I think that's where it generally comes from, of like getting someone drunk, and therefore feeling like they'll be more down to sleep with you, perhaps.
It's like what Jack was saying, like what you see when you do work as a DJ. Like you generally at the end of a night, like clubbing, the lights go on and you see guys in particular, like scanning the room. Like people are scanning to be like, who can I go home with? And my friend and I were talking about this the other day because she was like, oh, I went out and my friends and I were watching this one guy who he like hit on them and they were like, no. Like he was clearly just like going around to everyone trying to go home with someone and get them to go home with him. They were just watching him get rejected. And then at the end of the night, they saw him with a girl who was like keen and saw them go home together. And they were like, well, he eventually got to someone. And it's like, I think that culture is what makes me feel really sick about alcohol and consent when you think about like Promising Young Woman and the context of that movie. And I think that to me is like, yeah, the whole mentality of someone trying to like find someone because they're like easy when they've been drinking.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to this idea of that alcohol is often masking our kind of feelings that we haven't dealt with. And I think this is a particular problem for men. It's something that I definitely felt in my life when I was younger, is that you needed the validation of like sleeping with someone to feel good about yourself. And then again, the path to get that is to get really drunk and lower the inhibition so you're more confident to try and find someone. And then the lights come on and it's like, oh no, like now I'm faced with the reality that I haven't validated myself, and now I need to get myself into a situation, anyone. And then again, that puts them in a really dangerous position. It puts you in a dangerous position as well, because you're not making the right decision. You're trying to fill something that can't be filled with alcohol and can't be filled with sex, with these two things that then can really put people in danger and yourself in danger. So I think that's a really big part of our culture. That's kind of, we need to take that step away from even dating and take that step away from alcohol, is that really it's about like our day-to-day self validation and like finding a sense of self that we don't have to reach for the bottle or go to the club to feel good. Like we just want to go and listen to Taylor Swift on the dance floor. That's cool.
Yes,
but like you don't have to then connect that to like, you can have that good night. You can sing Love Story at the top of your lungs and go home, and that can be a good night. And you don't have to like try and fill that hole that isn't going to be filled by
you
having
never
sex.
feel good. Like,
No.
sorry.
No.
Tell me one time you felt good waking up being like, who is this? And like just so much regret. Like it's just like it's just like that sick feeling of like, why am I here in like 2 hours away from like my home and I have to try and get home now? And like it's just like that feeling is the worst feeling in the whole entire world.
How long do I have to stay?
Yeah, like
I
can't afford to get home. Like how do I get home? Like
it's just to share sort of a personal anecdote. I felt kind of similar to what you were saying, Jack. Like go out, drink. What's tied to my self-worth? You know, the classic things you get told, you know, growing up as a guy, whether it's how well you played on the weekend, your job, or your body count. And so, you know, I'd have that moment where it's like, oh my God, that's how I can work out my value if I've taken someone home. But I think a helpful way I ended up thinking about it, and this might be a bit airy-fairy for some, but it's just, you just got to have so much more self-love for yourself as a young man. Like you are worthy of love and you are lovable just as you are. You don't need to go out there and sleep with someone just to fill that hole. But I think you treat people, you know, like you objectify them a bit when you go do that, but you're actually also doing that to yourself, I think. And you're kind of assuming that the only redeemable feature about yourself is maybe your looks. To get a question out of that, Tom, if you could see those behaviours being exhibited in a young person, be it male or female, what would you say to them to hopefully get them on a better track?
Well, I mean, I feel like I've been that young person as well, you know, being young, figuring life out, figuring out your friend group, figuring out what you want to do with your life, in your career, your family, things like that. Some of these elements are a part of growing up. Sleeping with people, dating, going out drinking perhaps, maybe trying new things and so on. Like, yes, some of these experiences are very fun and you know, during those formative years and first experiences during youth are really fun. Depends what your reasoning is behind it. Like, are you dating to try and meet someone and have a genuine connection and find a relationship? Are you doing it to fill a void? It's a really easy thing to do. It's a really quick high. It's casual dating, going out and drinking, but it never does fill the void at the end of the day. Often, what does feel fulfilling is friendships, families, close connections. Those are what really I think like root in a good life. So yeah, it's a hard one. Most people will do it. Most people will have the experience of going out, drinking, dating, sleeping with people. That's not a bad thing. It's not a crime to do those things. You're allowed to have fun and experience those things, providing it's all done, safely and consensually. But at the end of the day, like that doesn't fill that hole in the end of the day. That's sort of my general take on it.
And a great answer. I think a young person would really turn a corner after that.
Yeah, I was like,
Oh,
wow,
wow.
I've turned a corner.
Like, oh my God. So, Jack, we've obviously established that we have to consider intoxication when it comes to consent. We've kind of been looking at it through our own two eyes. But what are we really trying to value and to bring other people, the people that we're potentially trying to sleep with into this? What are we trying to value within them or avoid?
Well, I mean, it's just so important to be thinking about other people that are in our lives, and especially in situations when it comes to sex and dating. Like, you need to consider someone else's state of mind. You need to consider someone else's bodily autonomy. Like, these are things that are really important to think about, and think about other people with empathy. And so if we are just going out and trying to find someone to have sex with, and we're going to places where alcohol is being consumed, then we're not actually truly valuing other people's bodily autonomy. We're not truly thinking about those other people, because we're there in a place where their inhibitions have also been lowered, and they're positioned to consent to things and to think clearly and to really see you from a clear point of view is diminished. And so then you're not really like building that relationship from a foundation of respect and empathy or consent. And so I think that's a really like bitter pill to swallow, because it is so ingrained in our culture, and it is so much the normal thing to do. But I think like the rule of thumb that I'm trying to apply in my life, and this is everyone's on their own path, but it's just to try and separate sex and dating from alcohol and being drunk. And I think we talked about it before, having one or two drinks or whatever, that's okay, that's fine. It's nice to have a wine or a beer at the pub or whatever, but really trying to like then value that exchange that you're having, like that relationship, and get to know each other on a level that is fully present. And so I think that's kind of why we should be thinking about it. We should be thinking about other people and their ability to be there with you as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, great answer. Thank you, Jack.
Thanks, no worries.
So, Dee, how do we then distinguish between someone who's had a few drinks and still capable of consenting versus someone who's too intoxicated?
See, this is like what Tom was saying, right? With the difference of like what people's limits are.
Yeah.
I think there's really clear indications. Like, you can tell when someone is like present with you, like their spirit's there, they're looking you in the eyes, they're like animated and talking, and they're not slurring their words, their body's not swaying. Like, I think there is really clear signs. Yeah, I think it's not just like looking for people who are like slurring and body swaying and all of those things and like rolling their eyes or like not being able to stand up. I think it's also like, has their personality changed?
Well, then to take a slight deviation, let's sort of discuss the scenario of going out and drinking and want to go home with someone, because it can be fun. So how do we navigate it and keep it fun, do you think, Dee?
The thing is like, you also don't want to be so anxious and stressed that, I mean, it's so great to consider, especially what Jack said, like, and to be also like, think about the person on the receiving end of that. Like, you've gotten laid, great for you, but then on the receiving end, that person's not remembered what happened. And that is like the scariest feeling in the whole entire world. Like, your like body, your like who, like, you've just been completely used in a way you don't know. And so I don't like it is really important to think about that. But then also, like, I've a lot of young guys who talk to us on the hookup, like, have gotten to the point, even post Me Too, where they're just like so paralyzed and don't even know how to make the first move and don't want to overstep, and and that's so valid and that's so important. But yeah, I think you're right. Like, we don't want to scare people into like not dating at all, because now we're seeing like the lowest rates of people in relationships and dating, and like people are choosing to be single, and that's a whole other conversation. But it is really fun, like Tom said, like it's a part of growing up.
And you raise a good point. Like, no one should be scared off from dating, sleeping with people, going out for a drink. And no one has to be scared of doing that. It shouldn't be something that are stopped in their tracks. I think there's also a bit of a misconception about what is consent. It is asking someone for consent. Does that kill the mood? In my experience, it is not a mood killer at all. There is nothing wrong with communicating to another adult consensually. Are you okay if I do this, or are you enjoying this? And nothing happens if you don't get together. If you ask to, hey, do you want to head back for a drink, and the other person isn't feeling it, no worries. You just go home, you go to bed. It's okay. And there's no bad repercussion to that. And I think it's important for young people to almost, even if it is stopping themselves in the track of like, okay, like the night is ending here, but that asking for consent isn't a mood killer. Nothing is wrong with that, and asking the
It's
question.
actually really hot.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
No, I was just like, in my head, I was thinking about my partner on our second date asked to kiss me, and I thought it was the cutest thing in the whole entire world. So I just think like, I think people think like, yeah, like what you're saying, like consent is just like this, oh, like, do you consent? It's like, no, like just ask, like, can I kiss you? Like, is this okay? Like, it's actually really like cute, and I think it's really romantic. It's like, it doesn't have to be this like awkward thing. It can actually be like really nice.
100%.
And
so,
like you might, sorry, just quickly jump in there. And if you do ask to kiss someone and they say no, then you'd rather feel that kind of little ooh, than try to kiss them and then get yourself into a
like-
situation
Oh,
where exactly. And
100%.
so yeah, it's so much better just to ask and to know. And you know, if you're reading the signs well, then you probably already have a sense of the answer from body language and stuff. But yeah, if you don't know, just ask. I think is always the way.
it's also, I find, really common, and in my experience and speaking to friends as well, in the dating scene for young people at the moment, and for any age of that matter, any background, you might go on a first date, you might kiss. Person A might then ask if they'd like to go up to the bedroom or go back to the house, and the other person might say no. And on the second date, then perhaps they're down to sleep together. Like that's it, you know, it's okay if you kiss and then nothing happens after that. Like it really comes down to how the other person is feeling and what they feel like. And you as a person feeling confident that if they do consent, you know, you can tell they're in the right of mind and they're definitely down, and those signs are there as well.
I love all that. That's great. Because it's like growing up as a guy going to public school, like there is a, you know, pressure to sort of be like smooth and a womanizer and things. And to hear that like you can just ask or say it, like I've similar experience to you, D. Like I've had, you know, I could remember every single time someone's like said the words, I want to kiss you, can I kiss you? And it feels so nice, right?
Like my favorite moment ever.
Yeah.
It was so cute. And it was really romantic on the street. And I don't know, I just like, I think guys especially feel this pressure to be really smooth.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes the conversations around consent can scare them. And as a woman, like, absolutely not. Like, if anything, it's like such a green flag, and it just like changes the person that like you're dating with, because you're like, wow, they've actually considered and asked, and like it sounds like bare minimum, but it's so rare.
You mentioned something before, Jack, about it sounded like you kind of separate your nights out between, you know, when you were drinking per se, versus like maybe, oh, we might go out to meet someone, or this is just going out with friends. How does that work?
Yeah,
for
I
you?
think I haven't really explored this idea of like going out and trying to meet someone at a bar and be sober or only have 2 drinks. I think inherently you're going to put yourself in a position where as the night goes on, more people are having more drinks. So that's not really going to solve that problem. I think maybe looking for other places where only a few drinks are being consumed or just no drinks at all. It's probably like a better place to go and try and meet people organically. And you know, there's run clubs.
I was about to say run clubs.
Yeah, and like, and they're talking about, you know, there's dating at the footy, and obviously like there's, you know, drinking at the footy, but there's other places where you might have shared values and shared interests already that kind of already give you that like that launching off point to have a conversation, that you don't have to have that liquid courage to go in and strike up a conversation, because you can just be like, hey, how about those new runners that just came out the other day or whatever.
Have you ever seen me DJ?
That's what, the fourth time? I think also like prior to that, trying to find that confidence in myself just to be able to like go out and have a night and not have it needed to be validated by hooking up with someone. Just hanging out with my mates is all the validation I need in that sense.
Great point. You're right. Finding common ground without drinking is very important. But if we sort of take it back and revisit, obviously drinking is now involved again, but I love the chat about us all checking in and things. And what do you think? Can we think of some examples that we can give people for how to check in when someone appears too drunk? So not just I want to kiss you, can I kiss you? But more, how are you feeling? That kind of stuff.
It's something I've done in my dating life as well, and it's more. This isn't even necessarily from trying to advance the date. Necessarily. But after getting a drink or after hanging out, just saying, do you still want to keep hanging out? Are you still enjoying tonight? And then the other person might say, I might finish this drink and head off, or they might say, yeah, no, I'm still really enjoying it. Yeah, we can get some food after or something like that. You're welcome to check along the way. It also kind of establishes how the other person is feeling as well. Like I've been on a sober date, as you know, I said a couple, and rock climbing, random one, a bit like a run club. And I said, you still enjoying yourself? Are you right to keep hanging out? And they still wanted to hang out. And it was sort of, the rock climbing place finished, went back to mine, played some darts, and they went home. There was nothing that advanced after that. But even just generally getting a vibe check rather than, coming back with an extra round without consulting with the person, or just really asking them, do you still want to keep hanging out? Are you enjoying tonight? And, you can sort of judge a bit off that, how they're feeling.
Yeah, they're great.
Love that.
Terms of phrases and stuff. That's awesome, Tom. How about if you've already advanced into bed with the person and you're still getting that feeling, or maybe they're too drunk? How do we check in that intimate environment?
It's probably the same way that you would with any sex, right? Like affirmative consent isn't just about like an enthusiastic yes. It's about being really present with the person that you're sleeping with and making sure that you're in tune with how they are showing up. Because even though they're saying like enthusiastic yes, maybe there are signs that they might not actually mean that, and be really present. Like what's their body language showing? Like what sounds are they making? Like, are they really into this? Like, or like we were saying before, like, are they slurring their words a bit? And are they a bit maybe like too hectically into it? Like what I was saying before, it can always wait. Like, I think there's this thing, like, especially if you've gone home together and you feel like there's been too much alcohol consumed, like take a breather and just go to sleep and wake up in the morning and do it again.
Great point. Yeah.
You can't, like, it doesn't mean that, like, you can still both be like enthusiastically yes for each other, but maybe just wait. And that yes can be the next morning when you've had a good night's sleep, you've had some
Water.
I was about to say some hash browns, some hot chips and a burger. And you're a bit more sober, and you can, like, because you might wake up the next morning and be like, who is this? Or like, I didn't actually want to do this. I want to go home. I'm mortified. Or you might be like, hell yeah, so nice that I met you. Let's go. Mm-hmm. So I think like look for that, but also just like know that like just because it's not a yes now doesn't mean it won't be another day or the next morning, or like there's nothing wrong with being like, hey, let's do this again another time.
And so maybe then on that, D, what if we're out with someone who's not actively checking in and we're starting to feel too drunk? What are some things that we can say to maybe indicate, hey, this is going too far for me?
To be able to feel comfortable, like that takes a certain type of person, but also it takes knowing someone. Like trust in my eyes is built and it's earned. And so I think it's really hard if you're both out and this person, you don't really know them. You've only spoken to them like for an hour or however long. Like that trust is really hard to be built in that time frame. So like that even in itself is a thing to consider around like, should you even go home with someone that you don't really know? I think it's a real safety concern for women. And yeah, like that, it's the reality though. Like we do go out, we hook up and drink alcohol and we go home and we have sex. But I think like, yeah, taking into consideration like how well do you actually really know this person? If you've just met them, probably not. So how can you really say that you trust them? Yeah, so I think like just keeping safety in mind, but hopefully you feel safe enough to just be able to be like, hey, I'm actually a bit drunk, like I'm going to go home, or like I'm going to go hang out with my friends. So many girls will relate to that feeling though of like genuinely not being able to get rid of a guy. Like just leave. Like you'll be out and you'll be drinking and they'll just continuously not get the message. And I think that's really hard. Like you can communicate and be like, hey, like I'm just hanging out with my friends, or you'll be like giving off body language that's like, I'm not interested. But there are just like some guys who don't get the picture. And I think that's really hard because then at that point you genuinely do feel a bit unsafe, and it's like you don't feel like you can be aggressive in the way of being like, leave me alone, you know?
If the men in that situation potentially just don't want to get it, they don't want to
Yeah.
read the signs because they're, as we spoke about earlier, like they're just really keen to increase their body count, and so that's the thing that they're worried about, and they're consciously avoiding some of the basic body language signs, or even the verbal kind of communication that's coming towards them. And I think that then as men, like we have a real like hearing what you're saying and applying that to every situation that we're in, reminding ourselves that in these situations we do have a sense of power. It is mostly people that look like us, that act like us, that are the ones that are perpetrating. And I think that can be another bitter pill for us to swallow. But we have to remember that when we go into these situations, that we do have a responsibility to be looking out for those signs, to be looking out for things that we might not want to see because it confirms whatever feelings that we had, negative feelings that we have about ourselves, that we're not attractive or no one wants to be with us, or whatever the feelings that we're bringing to those situations. So we got to be careful that we're not kind of avoiding those confirmation bias signs. And again, sometimes it's uncomfortable, but it's so much better, as you said before, like to be in a situation where someone is genuinely keen to have sex with you, genuinely keen to kiss you, and maybe it is waiting to the next morning, and you'd rather be in that situation that the person that you've had sex with isn't like freaking out the next morning being like, how do I get out of here? Where am I? I think most people don't want to put someone in that position. I think realistically, that's not what we want someone else to be feeling.
Also, like if people are having sex to feel validation, which is like a huge driver of hookup culture, like wouldn't you rather feel validated when someone is like sober or hungover being like, hell yeah, like I still want to have sex with you and I find you attractive, rather than them being really drunk and it's like they're just doing it because they're drunk?
I think the interesting point on that, just quickly, is that maybe it's because we're actually bringing so many other people into the bedroom with us. We're in those situations and we're thinking about what our mates, like the story that we're going to have to tell our mates, and then we're going to be like, okay, well, what's my tally up to now? And like we're almost like we're not fully present in that moment to get that validation necessarily even from that person that we're having sex with or trying to have sex with. We're actually seeking the validation from our mates. There's so much of that, so much pressure that that's put on men to sleep with lots of women as a sense of like masculinity in itself. And I think that's also where a lot of the problem goes into, where we're not even necessarily seeking validation from the person we're trying to have sex with. It's the 20 guys in the group chat the next day that we're going to send the message to.
And Dee, we spoke a lot about sort of body language cues and checking in when you're single. What does that look like when alcohol is involved with a partner?
Well, it probably is an easier situation because if we're thinking like you've been with your partner for a long time, you know them so well. So I think then like you probably have like the knowledge to be able to tell like, oh, that's out of character for my partner, or like they're clearly like drunk. I know my partner so well, like they are like not going to be able to consent to this, or like, and also like you should be in a relationship that's safe, and you both should trust each other so much that like why would you want to put your partner in a situation where you're like they might regret this, or like they might not actually enjoy this. So I think that like it's not as like strict, if we can say, because you like know your partner so well, and that like you probably know like you've had conversations around like their limits, and you know what they can drink and when they've like drunk too much. So I think it's like easier in that sense. But I still think, like Tom said, like consent is still so important. Like it's ongoing consent always, and body language plays a huge part in that. Like even with affirmative consent, like we were saying, like you need to look for like what's their body showing, like are they actually into this? Like what are the cues? And hopefully if you know your partner well enough, you'll be able to pick up on that.
Yeah, I think it's important then to really like, you know, the body languages, you know, the signs, but you can still ignore those signs. And that when alcohol is involved, there is still going to be a limit where both partners absolutely can't consent anymore, and where one or both the sexual of the partners can sexually assault the other. And so like sexual assault still does really exist in relationships. I think there is like there's a misconception that you can't sexually assault your partner because it's kind of like this, now you're in a relationship, you're always consenting. So the same ideas of consent still apply even when alcohol's in there. You might know where your partner's limit is, and you need to abide by that limit, and you need to be looking at for those signs. And if you ignore those signs, then it's still sexual assault. So that's also really important to remember.
And I think on that, I think there are going to be a lot of people listening to this and reflecting on past experiences that might not have been consensual because alcohol was involved, and they're only just coming to that realization now. So how can we begin to process these experiences, and what pieces of advice could we give people?
I would say, as someone who had like a really pivotal moment, which I kind of mentioned, where I had to reflect on a lot of my sexual experiences and be like, okay, a lot of that was really fueled with alcohol, and a lot of it wasn't consensual, and that was really traumatic. If I'm being honest, it was really traumatic to be like, wow, I've been sexually assaulted because I've been so drunk that someone has had sex with me. That was really, really hard. So my advice would be, if you are listening or watching this and you are having that realization for the first time, is be really kind to yourself in allowing yourself to feel what you are feeling. It will be tough. It is something that is tough to hear and to like realize and to reflect on. And for me, everyone's journey is going to be different. But for me, that, like I said, made me not want to date for a while. And it made me want to think about the way that I was dating and the people that I was having sex with. And I did a lot of work on myself. And that was a journey. And that was like all these different feelings and experiences and working through past traumas. Like, why was I needing to get that drunk? Like, what was leading to me hooking up with guys that I probably wouldn't sober? So yeah, my advice is just like, let yourself go through the process. I worked with a therapist as well, not particularly like to do with just that, but with a lot of like stuff that's from my past. And that was like one of the best things that I ever did. But I just think like, yeah, if you are having these realizations, like it is okay to take a step out of dating and let yourself work through what it is that is coming up for you, whether that's with friends or family or with like a therapist. And hopefully in some time you might re-enter the dating scene with a different perspective of like who you want to have sex with. Are they respectful? Do they value you? Is there trust? Like, is it consensual? Are they on the same page as you? It is, I just want to really validate that it is a really hard thing to realize.
Yeah. And I guess I never feel like I really know the exact right thing to say here, but I appreciate a lot that you shared your experience, because it would have been no doubt extremely hard to go through, but also very hard to share. So thank you very much, because I feel like there's going to be so many people listening that relate to that as well and are so even more grateful than, say, me for hearing that. So thanks heaps for feeling comfortable to share that. And Jack, just to finish with you, if people are having these reflections, what kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, well, like on the flip side to what you're saying, D, is that there will be also people listening that are thinking about their past experiences where they potentially are realizing that they were the perpetrator. And it's also like a really important thing to face. And we obviously, like, being the perpetrator of sexual violence is not good. And we don't want to be perpetrators of sexual violence, and we don't want other people to be the perpetrators of sexual violence, which is why it's so important to understand the principles of consent and practice consent in everything that we do, not just in sexual relationships, but all throughout our life. But if you are coming to the realization that you have perpetrated harm, then you have to think about where that was coming from. This idea that we talk about in our work is the entitlement outweighs empathy, and coming back to that, thinking about your 20 mates in the group chat, kind of egging you on in your mind when you're in these situations where you just kind of didn't care enough to think about the other person's experience and their autonomy, then there's so many societal pressures that are going into that. And we have to like really kind of think about why we made that decision, why we didn't consider someone else's perspective enough, and why we can't go back in time and change that. We can think about how we're going to carry ourselves into the future. And I think that's a really important thing for all of us to do, and really think about the things that were affecting us to make a harmful decision, to really think about the harm that we may have perpetrated on someone else, to think about what it would be like for them, and then to go out into the world and subscribe and kind of consign ourselves to trying to be the best version of ourselves, acknowledging all the pressures that are on all of us in the world, and thinking about other people, always thinking about other people's experiences in everything that we do, and absolutely make that decision to never perpetrate that kind of same harm again. And it's not, and I don't want to say it's an easy thing to do, but if you are checking in with people, if you are learning about the principles of consent and really getting an understanding and really thinking about other people's point of view, then it makes it really hard to ever perpetrate sexual assault. And so, unfortunately, the thing that gets in the way of that is the consumption of alcohol. And so I think, while I'm not saying just give up alcohol and never have sex after having any drinks, it's just something that we have to think about, and we have to make those decisions for ourselves, and what level of like comfort we have in all of our sexual experiences around how much we want to bring alcohol into the bedroom with us. And for me, I think that's maybe not at all. But that's been a lifelong journey, like, in my whole adult life. It's taken me to get to that. So I'm not expecting everyone to make that decision just based off listening to this podcast, but it's something that it's worth considering, I think.
Gosh, it feels like selfish to get to sit in and listen. Like, it's such a privilege to get to sit and listen to you all speak. And so I can't thank you all enough for your anecdotes, for your opinions, for your expertise. And I got no doubt that if you're listening, you're going to feel the exact same way. And whether this is the start of your journey, or whether you've read Chanel's book, Consent Laid Bare, or whether you've stumbled across Teach Us Consent's Instagram or website, welcome on board. And thank you all so much. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Dee. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.